It was one of those days that felt too peaceful to be real. The kind of morning where sunlight poured through narrow Italian streets, rushing over rooftops, glinting off cafe windows, and making you forget that monsters could live in daylight too. The city of Palermo was alive, children laughing, vendors shouting, the smell of bread and espresso floating through the air. And right in the heart of it all stood Lucia's cafe. Lucia was 31, with kind eyes and a smile that could calm storms. Everyone knew her. Everyone loved her. She had that gentle way about her. A voice like sunlight on quiet water. Inside her cafe, she moved between tables, pouring coffee, serving pastries, humming softly to an old Italian tune playing on the radio. To strangers, she was just another hardworking woman trying to make ends meet. But to those who paid attention, there was something deeper, a sadness she hid behind her smile, a story she never told. She paused for a moment, looking out the window, across the street, toward the old clock tower. Her gaze softened, almost wistful. And then, the low hum of an approaching engine broke her thoughts. A sleek black car stopped outside her cafe. The sunlight flashed against its polished surface, and for a second, everything went quiet. The car door opened. Out stepped Matteo Ricci, the name whispered through every alley and corner of the city. The man people feared more than death itself. But the moment his eyes found Lucia, the ice in him melted. Matteo was in his 40s, tall, sharp, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit. His presence alone could silence a room. But when he entered Lucia's cafe, the tension that followed him everywhere seemed to fade, just a little. Lucia smiled, nervous but warm. "Good afternoon, Matteo," she said softly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. He nodded, voice deep but gentle. "Lucia." Their exchange was brief, but heavy with unspoken history. He always came around noon, sat in the corner by the window, ordered black coffee, and stayed for exactly 15 minutes. Some thought it was habit, but those close to Matteo knew it wasn't the coffee he came for. It was her. Lucia placed his cup in front of him. Steam rose between them. Warm, fleeting. "Busy today," she said, trying to sound casual. He nodded, eyes scanning her face as if memorizing every freckle. "People like being near peace," he replied. Then, with a faint smile, "Maybe they come for that, not the coffee." She laughed softly. "Then I should start charging extra." But behind the small smiles and quiet words, there was something else, something unsaid. Years ago, Lucia had saved Matteo's life. A car accident. A burning wreck on the outskirts of the city. She didn't know who he was then, just that he was a man dying on the roadside. And she pulled him out, risking her own life to save his. Since that day, he never forgot her. He protected her from afar, made sure no one ever touched her, no one ever brought harm near her little cafe. But Lucia never asked for protection. All she wanted was to live quietly, far from the shadows that Matteo walked in. Still, he came, every day, without fail, like a ghost chasing light. As Matteo took a slow sip from his cup, Lucia noticed two men at the far table, strangers she'd never seen before. They didn't order anything. They just sat there, pretending to read newspapers, their eyes flicking toward Matteo, and then toward her. Something about them felt wrong. Their stillness, their silence, the way one of them reached under his coat, then stopped when Matteo looked up. Her heart skipped. She turned away quickly, trying to focus on the dishes, but her hands trembled slightly. When Matteo stood to leave, she followed him to the door, her smile a little tighter this time. "See you tomorrow?" she asked. He hesitated, sensing something off in her tone. "Always," he said softly. Then he put on his sunglasses, stepped out into the sunlight, and walked back toward his car. Lucia watched him go, the reflection of the sun flashing off the glass, until he disappeared into traffic. The two strangers exchanged a look. Then one of them smiled. A cold, knowing smile. That afternoon, the cafe emptied out. The chatter faded, replaced by the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the sound of Lucia cleaning tables. Her friend Rosa, a waitress, noticed her distracted gaze. "You look pale. Everything okay?" she asked. Lucia forced a smile. "Just tired. That's all." But even Rosa could tell. Lucia's eyes kept darting to the window, toward the street where the black car had been parked earlier. At one point, Lucia stepped outside to take the trash out. The alley behind the cafe was narrow and quiet. Too quiet. She paused, feeling the strange weight of eyes watching her. When she turned around, no one was there, just a stray cat running past, and the soft hum of city life in the distance. Still, her chest tightened. Inside, her phone buzzed, a message from Matteo's right-hand man, Enzo. "Keep the doors locked tonight, just in case." Lucia frowned, typing back, "Why? What's happening?" But no reply came. The sun began to dip lower. The cafe closed early. Lucia stood by the door, locking up for the evening. The golden light of sunset washed over her face, soft and glowing, almost painting her in peace. She smiled faintly to herself. The street was calm. For a moment, it felt safe again. She took a deep breath, picked up her bag, and began the short walk home through the back alley. The sound of her heels echoed against the cobblestones, steady, rhythmic. A breeze carried the scent of jasmine from the nearby gardens. Everything felt normal, too normal. Halfway down the alley, her phone buzzed again. Matteo. She smiled, answering quickly. "Matteo, I was just." A sudden sound cut through her words. Footsteps. Behind her. Slow, deliberate. Her voice faltered. "Hello? Matteo?" But the call dropped. The screen flickered. Then, black. She turned around slowly. At first, there was nothing. Then, from the corner of the alley, a shadow moved. Two men, the same faces from the cafe. Lucia stepped back, heart pounding. "Who are you? What do you want?" No answer. Just the echo of boots against stone. She ran. Her breath hitched, the bag slipping from her shoulder. One of them grabbed her wrist. She screamed, the sound muffled by a rough hand. The phone fell, hitting the ground hard. The screen cracked, still glowing faintly with Matteo's name calling. The sunlight caught it for one last second before it went dark. The city kept moving. Cars passed. Children laughed. The sea shimmered in the distance, as if nothing had happened. But somewhere, in a quiet alley just beyond the heart of Palermo, peace died that day, and the man who once walked away from violence was about to bring it back to life. Because when Matteo Ricci finds her phone ringing in the dust, the storm will finally begin. Morning came like any other day, but peace didn't return with it. The sun rose over Palermo, lighting up streets that had no idea what had happened the night before. And somewhere near the heart of that city, in a small cafe that once smelled of coffee and laughter, the scent of blood now lingered in the air. Matteo Ricci's black car rolled to a stop in front of Lucia's cafe. The clock on the dashboard read 8:42 a.m. He was never this early. He stepped out, adjusting his suit jacket, sunglasses glinting under the sunlight. But something felt wrong. The street was too quiet. The cafe door, slightly open. Matteo frowned. Lucia never left it unlocked. Ever. He called her name once. No answer. Then again, louder. Still nothing. He pushed the door open slowly. The bell above the entrance gave its familiar soft ring, but even that sound felt out of place. Inside, silence. The tables were overturned. A chair lay broken near the counter. And there, on the white marble tiles, a dark red streak dragged toward the back room. Matteo froze. For a man feared by thousands, his hands had never trembled before. Until now. He walked slowly, every step echoing louder than the last. His polished shoes smeared through the red on the floor. The air was thick, like the world itself was holding its breath. When he reached the back door, he stopped. For a second, he couldn't move, didn't want to see what waited beyond. Then, quietly, he pushed the door open. Lucia was there, lying on the floor, her pale hands stretched out, fingers trembling, reaching toward the light. Her hair was matted with blood, her face pale, but she was breathing. Barely. Matteo dropped to his knees beside her. His voice broke, quiet but desperate. Lucia. Hey, look at me. Lucia. Her eyes fluttered open, faintly focusing on him. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. He brushed her hair back gently, his hands stained red. You're okay, stay with me. Lucia blinked slowly, her voice a whisper like a dying flame. Blue. Matteo leaned closer, confused. What? What did you say? Her lips trembled again. Blue handkerchief. And then her body went still. The sound that left Matteo's throat wasn't anger. It wasn't rage. It was something deeper, an agony that cracked through his soul. For a long moment, he didn't move. He just sat there, cradling her head, staring at the sunlight streaming through the window, that same light that once made her smile. He whispered to no one, his voice hollow. Who did this? His eyes hardened. Tears burned behind them, but he didn't let them fall. He stood up, straightened his jacket, and pulled out his phone. Enzo, he said quietly, bring the car, and tell the men. No one sleeps tonight. He hung up without waiting for a response. Then, slowly, he looked around the cafe. Every broken cup, every drop of blood, it all spoke to him. He noticed something small on the floor near the counter, a torn piece of blue cloth. He picked it up, fingers tightening until the fabric nearly tore. Lou, Lucia's last word. An hour later, the city began to stir with rumors. People whispered that Matteo Ricci's eyes had turned to stone, that his men were spreading through every alley and every block. Enzo met him outside the cafe. He was nervous, everyone was. Boss, he said quietly, we'll find who did this. You have my word. Matteo didn't look at him. He just stared at the cafe sign, the one Lucia had painted herself. The sun reflected off the letters, and for a second, it almost looked golden again. Her hands used to smell like coffee and vanilla, Matteo murmured. Now all I can smell is blood. Enzo said nothing. Then Matteo turned, his voice low but sharp enough to cut air. Start with the docks, the slums, the bars. Anyone who moves in my city tonight, I want to know. Understood. And Enzo, tell them to bring me answers, not excuses. The camera would cut between the day fading into afternoon and Matteo's men sweeping the city. Doors slammed open, men dragged into alleys. Questions whispered, answers shouted, fists slamming into tables. No one dared lie. No one dared hide. By sunset, the entire city knew. The boss was hunting. Matteo watched from his car as the sun dipped lower, orange light glinting off the windshield. He hadn't spoken in hours. His phone buzzed again. Enzo's voice came through. Boss, we found something. You should see this. When Matteo arrived, Enzo stood by a stone wall at the edge of the marketplace. There, pinned with a knife, was a blood-stained handkerchief, blue, embroidered with silver thread. A symbol stitched in the corner, a lion's head surrounded by laurel leaves. Matteo recognized it immediately. The Moretti family, his oldest enemies. He reached out, touching the fabric with a shaking hand. Lucia said it, he whispered. Blue. Enzo looked uneasy. Boss, if it's the Morettis. Matteo cut him off. If it's them, then the streets will remember her name. The words were quiet, but they hit harder than any scream. That night, Matteo sat alone in his office, a dark room lit only by the golden glow of a desk lamp. Lucia's photo lay in front of him, a simple picture taken last summer. She was smiling, holding a cup of coffee, sunlight in her hair. He stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, he reached for the gun in his drawer. He placed it on the table beside the photo. Next to it, the blue handkerchief. He whispered to himself, you told me once that violence only breeds more pain. But they didn't take my money. They didn't take my business. They took you. His hand clenched into a fist. He stood up, shoulders tense, and walked toward the window overlooking the city. The lights of Palermo shimmered below, calm, peaceful, unaware. If it's blood they wanted, then it's blood they'll get. By midnight, every major player in the city had heard the order. The Ricci men were moving, fast, silent, unstoppable. The boss wanted names, faces, confessions. And for the first time in years, no one dared breathe wrong. But Matteo, he wasn't out for control anymore. This wasn't business. This was personal. Enzo tried to talk sense into him. Boss, if you start a war now, the city won't survive it. Matteo didn't even look at him. Then let it burn. Just before dawn, Matteo returned to Lucia's cafe. The floor was clean now. His men had cleared the mess, scrubbed away the blood. But he could still see it, could still feel it beneath his shoes. He walked to the counter, sat where she always stood, and placed the blue handkerchief on the table. The sunlight began to seep through the window, soft, golden, merciless. He whispered quietly, "Tell me who did this." His voice didn't echo this time. It fell heavy, final. And somewhere deep inside him, something broke. He stood, put on his jacket, and walked out into the street, his eyes cold, his heart gone. Behind him, the cafe door swung shut. The faint sound of the bell echoed, like a goodbye. By the time the city woke up, the hunt had already begun, and the blood on those tiles was only the beginning. The sun rose over Palermo, but no one called it a good morning. The streets that once sang with laughter now whispered in fear. Shop doors stayed closed, windows shut. Even the sea, calm and blue, seemed to hold its breath, because everyone knew the boss had woken angry. And when Matteo Ricci was angry, the city trembled. Matteo stood on the rooftop of his villa, overlooking the city below. The daylight burned bright, casting long shadows across the narrow streets. He'd been awake all night, no sleep, no peace, just thoughts, memories, rage. In his hand, he held the blue handkerchief, Lucia's final clue. He turned it over again and again, the fabric stained, frayed, a reminder of everything he lost. Behind him, Enzo approached quietly. "Boss," he said, "we've searched the docks, the markets, the bars. No one's talking." Matteo didn't turn around. His voice was calm, too calm. "They're not talking because they're afraid of the wrong manual." Enzo hesitated. "And who should they be afraid of?" Matteo's gaze hardened. "Me!" A heavy silence falls. There was no mercy in his eyes now, only the cold fire of a man who'd lost the only thing that made him human. By noon, the city was alive, but not with joy. The Ricci men moved in shadows, flooding the alleys, searching, dragging names out of silence. The sound of fists, breaking glass, and screaming whispers filled the air. In one corner of the marketplace, a man begged for mercy, a low-level informant, trembling before Matteo himself. "Please, boss, I swear, I don't know who did it," he cried. Matteo crouched in front of him, calm, collected, terrifying. "You're lying. I can smell it." He leaned in closer, his voice almost gentle. "You've got one chance left. Tell me something that matters, or I'll make sure you never lie again." The man stammered, eyes darting everywhere. It wasn't the Morettis. Someone paid them to do it. Matteo's eyes narrowed. I, I don't know the name," the man whimpered. But, but they said the money came from inside your family." Beat of silence. Matteo straightened up slowly, the air thick with tension. He turned to Enzo. "Get me every name that's touched my money in the last 6 months. Every accountant, every soldier, every cousin. I want them all here, today." Enzo nodded, pale. "Yes, boss." The city shivered under his command. For every order he gave, someone vanished before sunset. Fear spread faster than fire. But Matteo didn't care about fear anymore. He only wanted truth. That afternoon, Matteo sat alone in the church where Lucia once lit candles every Sunday. The sunlight streamed through stained glass, painting colors across the marble floor, colors that reminded him of her smile. He sat in silence, staring at the flickering flame. His thoughts whispered like ghosts. "You told me, Lucia, to stay out of the dark. You told me not to fight shadows with blood, but they dragged you into it. And now, I'll drag them out." His jaw clenched. A single tear slipped down his cheek. but he wiped it away before it could fall. He whispered to the empty church, "Forgive me." Then he stood and walked back out into the sunlight, into the war he was about to unleash. By evening, the Ricci estate filled with men, lieutenants, captains, bodyguards, all gathered under one roof. Dozens of faces, some loyal, some frightened, some hiding secrets. Matteo entered slowly, every head turning. The sound of his footsteps echoed like thunder. He didn't sit. He stood at the head of the long table, eyes cold as stone. "Someone," he began softly, "betrayed this family. Someone took my kindness and turned it into a weapon. And someone thought I'd let Lucia's blood dry without consequence." No one dared speak. The silence was suffocating. "So here's what will happen," Matteo continued. "I will ask questions. You will answer truthfully. Because if you lie to me—" He paused, his gaze sweeping over the room. "You won't leave this house alive." He motioned to Enzo. "Start." They began one by one. Names, alibis, lies wrapped in fear. Matteo's questions were calm, precise, merciless. He could read every heartbeat, every twitch, every flicker of guilt, until he reached Marco, one of his senior men, a nervous, heavy-set figure who'd served the Ricci family for 10 years. Matteo's eyes narrowed as he asked, "Marco, you handled the shipment money last week, didn't you?" Marco swallowed hard. "Why, yes, boss." "Did any of it go missing?" "No, boss, not a century." Matteo leaned forward. "Then why?" he said slowly. "Did one of our shell accounts pay 200,000 euros to a name I don't recognize?" Marco froze. Sweat dripped down his neck. I don't know what you're talking about." The slap came fast. Hard. The sound cracked through the silence. Matteo's voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't insult my intelligence." Enzo grabbed Marco by the collar, forcing him to his knees. "Who paid the Morettis?" Matteo demanded. "Who gave them her name?" Marco sobbed, voice shaking. "It wasn't me. I swear it wasn't me." Matteo crouched, inches from his face. "Then give me the name of the one who did." Tears streamed down Marco's face. "It came from the top. I swear, boss. It was family. It was your brother, Angelo." Beat of pure silence. Every man in the room froze. Even Enzo's breath caught. Matteo stood slowly. No one spoke. The air itself seemed to stop moving. "Angelo," Matteo repeated quietly. "My brother." He turned away, eyes unfocused, memories flashing through his mind. Angelo's laughter as kids. The nights they planned their empire together. The promises they made never to betray blood. And now this. He walked to the window, staring out into the fading light. The sun dipped below the rooftops, casting long red shadows over the courtyard. "Blood for blood," he murmured. "Even if it's my own." Enzo hesitated, then stepped closer. "Boss, maybe there's a mistake. We should confirm." Matteo cut him off, voice like steel. "There are no mistakes." He turned back to the table, the men still trembling in silence. "Find Angelo," he said coldly, "before sunrise." Later that night, Matteo sat alone in his study. The city outside was eerily quiet, like it knew what was coming. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and stared at the flames in the fireplace. Each flicker reminded him of Lucia's hair in the sunlight. His reflection in the window looked older now, colder. He whispered to it, voice almost breaking, "You were the only one who ever made me believe I wasn't a monster." He took a long drink, eyes distant. "But I guess monsters don't get to keep angels." A soft knock on the door. Enzo entered, hesitant. "Us." "We found him." Matteo's glass paused halfway to his lips. "Where?" "At his mansion, north side of the city. He's not running. Looks like. He's waiting." Matteo's eyes lifted slowly, cold, deadly, calm. "Then let him wait." He stood, buttoned his jacket, and reached for his gun. "Because I'm coming." And just like that, the night took a new shape. The city that once trembled in fear was about to bleed in truth. Because when brothers turn on each other, even God looks away. Night had fallen over Palermo. But it wasn't a night of peace. It was the kind of night when even the devils stayed inside. Because one man, Matteo Ricci, was walking through the dark with revenge burning in his chest. And this time, it wasn't for justice. It was for blood. Matteo's black car sliced through the empty streets. The headlights cut across the cobblestones, lighting up posters, corners, and crosses, silent witnesses to the storm about to break. Enzo drove in silence, eyes forward, afraid to breathe too loud. Matteo sat in the back seat, one hand resting on his gun, the other holding Lucia's small silver locket, the one he took from her that night. He turned it slowly, his eyes cold. Inside it was a faded picture of her smiling. "You always believed in family," he whispered, "even when you shouldn't have." The car slowed as they neared the northern hills. At the top stood Angelo's mansion, grand, white stone walls glowing under the moonlight, guarded by silence. Enzo swallowed hard. "Boss, he knows you're coming." Matteo looked out the window. His reflection in the glass looked nothing like a man anymore. "Good," he said softly. "Then he's ready to face what he created." The gates creaked open. No guards. No sound. Only the faint hum of crickets and the rustle of trees in the wind. Matteo stepped out first, his shoes crunching on gravel. Every step echoed. He moved up the marble stairs and pushed open the tall doors. Inside, the mansion was silent, too silent. Candles flickered on a long dining table. At the end of it sat Angelo Ricci, calm, composed, glass of wine in hand, wearing the same black suit as his brother. "You came?" Angelo said, voice calm, almost welcoming. "You shouldn't have made me," Matteo replied. They stared at each other across the table, two men with the same blood, the same eyes, but hearts now carved apart by betrayal. Angelo gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit, brother. Let's talk like men." Matteo didn't move. "Talk? After what you did?" Angelo sighed. "I didn't kill Lucia." Matteo's jaw tightened. "But you ordered it." "No," Angelo said quietly. "I allowed it." Beat of silence. Matteo's breathing slowed. His eyes darkened. "You allowed it?" Angelo looked down at his glass, his voice low. "She was changing you, Matteo. You were losing focus, losing control. Our business was bleeding. She wasn't one of us. She didn't belong in this world. She belonged to me," Matteo roared. The table rattled as he slammed his hand down. The candles flickered violently. Angelo didn't flinch. "And now you see why she had to go." Matteo took a slow step forward, his voice shaking with rage. "You think you saved me?" he spat. "You took everything good I ever had and called it business." Angelo stood, setting the wine glass aside. "I did what had to be done for the family." Matteo's eyes burned. "Then tonight, I'll do what has to be done for her." They stood face to face now, brothers who once shared dreams, now bound only by pain. Angelo's tone softened for a moment. "You were always the favorite, Matteo. The golden one. The people feared you, but they followed me. I built this empire while you chased ghosts and women." He smiled faintly, cold and proud. "Lucia made you weak, and weak men don't survive in our world." Matteo's voice broke, barely a whisper. "You talk about survival. But tell me, brother, how do you survive your own soul after you've murdered it?" The question hung heavy in the air. Angelo looked away, his jaw tight, but Matteo saw it. That flicker of guilt, that small, human crack. And in that crack, Matteo saw something break inside himself too. Matteo drew his gun slowly. Angelo didn't move. His eyes met his brother's, filled with a strange, sad acceptance. "You're not going to shoot me," Angelo said quietly. "I'm still your blood." Matteo's hand trembled. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, a war between pain and duty. "You stopped being my blood," he said softly, "the day you spilled hers." He raised the gun, but his finger froze on the trigger. He couldn't do it. Angelo smiled bitterly. "That's the difference between us, Matteo. You still think you're human." And then the gunshot echoed. Matteo blinked. But it wasn't his gun that fired. Angelo's hand held the smoking pistol. Enzo, at the doorway, staggered, a hole in his chest. He collapsed to the floor. "No!" Matteo shouted, running toward him. He caught Enzo before he hit the ground, holding him tightly. Blood soaked Matteo's hands. "Boss!" Enzo gasped, eyes fluttering. He had others waiting. Behind. Another shot cracked. The wall behind Matteo exploded with dust. He ducked, dragging Enzo behind a table for cover. Bullets tore through the furniture, shattering glass and candles. Angelo's voice echoed coldly through the room. "You should have stayed away, brother." Matteo's rage exploded. He grabbed his gun and fired back 3, 4, 5 rounds. Each shot roared with grief. Each one screamed her name. The men hidden in the shadows fell one by one, until silence filled the hall again. Smoke drifted through the air. The candles had gone out, leaving the room lit only by the glow of fire from a shattered lamp. Matteo rose slowly, breathing hard. Angelo stood across the table, his gun empty, his expression unreadable. "This is how it ends?" Matteo said. "Like this? Brothers tearing each other apart for power?" Angelo's voice was cold. "It was never about power. It was about control, and you lost it the day you let love blind you." Matteo shook his head. "No, brother. Love didn't blind me. It showed me what you really are." He stepped closer, eyes glistening, voice low. "The devil's blood runs in our veins. But you drank it willingly." Both men stood only feet apart now. The fire crackled behind them, painting their faces red. Outside, thunder rolled, as if the heavens were watching in silence. Matteo raised his gun again. "Last chance, Angelo. Tell me why. Tell me who helped you." Angelo's lips curved into a faint smile. "You still don't see it, do you?" "See what?" "It wasn't just me." "Then who?" A sudden sound cut through, a click behind Matteo. He turned and froze. Standing in the doorway was Rosa, Angelo's right hand, Lucia's sister. Her gun was aimed straight at Matteo's head. Matteo's voice cracked. "Rosa, you?" Her eyes were cold, shining with tears. "You promised to protect her. But she died because of you." Matteo shook his head. "No, you brought her into this life," Rosa screamed. "You dragged her into the fire. She begged you to leave, and you didn't. So don't you dare blame Angelo for what you started." Matteo's hand trembled. Everything around him blurred. The sound of crackling fire, the smell of blood, the memories flashing through his mind. Lucia's laugh, her tears, or whisper, "Promise me, Matteo, you'll stay human." And now, he was seconds away from losing the last piece of that promise. Rosa's hand tightened on the trigger. Angelo smirked from behind her. "You see, brother," Angelo said softly, "even angels turn to devils when the blood is ours." That night, the city of Palermo heard one final shot echo through the hills. No one knew who pulled the trigger, but everyone knew. It changed everything. The devil's blood had finally been spilled, and by sunrise, the streets would drown in its color. The night had ended, but the screams still echoed. Somewhere in the hills, the final gunshot faded into silence, leaving behind only smoke, blood, and regret. Palermo was waking up, but this morning, the city didn't breathe. It trembled, because the streets were about to be painted red. The mansion was a graveyard. Smoke curled up from shattered lamps, flames licking across marble floors. Matteo stood among the ruins, dazed, bleeding, trembling. In front of him, Rosa lay motionless on the ground. Her gun had fallen from her hand. Her eyes, still open, stared at the ceiling in silent disbelief. Across the room, Angelo leaned against the wall, a dark stain spreading across his chest. He coughed, blood on his lips, but still smiled faintly. "I told you," Angelo whispered, voice breaking. "Family always destroys itself." Matteo walked toward him slowly, every step echoing through the burning hall. "You killed everything that made us family." Angelo chuckled weakly, his breath fading. "You think killing me will make you free?" "No," Matteo said softly. "But it'll make me quiet." He raised his gun. Angelo looked up, eyes tired, sad. almost human for the first time in years. She would have hated what you've become, Angelo said. Matteo hesitated for a heartbeat, just one. Then the sound of the final shot shattered the dawn. Angelo Ricci fell forward, the last of his breath lost in the smoke. Soft silence. Matteo didn't move. He just stood there, staring at the lifeless body of the brother he once loved, the man he once trusted more than anyone. The flames danced behind him, flickering across his face, painting him in red and gold like a fallen god. Minutes later, Matteo walked out of the mansion. The fire roared behind him, consuming everything: walls, portraits, memories. He didn't look back. He didn't need to, because everything that mattered had already burned. Outside, Enzo's men were waiting, silent, anxious. They stared as Matteo appeared through the smoke, his suit torn, his hands dripping with blood. No words, no orders, just a nod. They understood. One of the men stepped forward. "Boss, what now?" Matteo's voice was quiet, cold. "Now, we clean the city." By midday, Palermo became a storm. Matteo moved through the streets like a shadow, calm, unstoppable. Every corner of the city felt his wrath. Warehouses burned. Cars exploded. Names that had betrayed him erased one by one. The Ricci men spread across districts, black cars rolling like thunder. Every shot fired echoed Matteo's pain. Every scream whispered Lucia's name. Narrator slow, intense tone. This wasn't business anymore. It wasn't power or revenge. It was punishment. A cleansing of every lie, every betrayal, every drop of poison that had lived inside his world. The people of Palermo shut their doors and prayed. Even the police stayed away, because everyone knew the devil was walking. Late afternoon, smoke hung over the city. Matteo stood at a crossroads near the old church, the same one where Lucia used to pray. His men had gone quiet. The killing had stopped. He looked around, the air thick with ashes, the streets empty, the silence almost holy. And then he saw a small boy, standing near the church steps, holding a white flower in his hand. Matteo froze. The boy's face, dark hair, brown eyes, looked hauntingly familiar. The child stared up at him, wide-eyed, trembling. "Mister," he said softly, "are you the man who made the fire?" Matteo couldn't answer. He looked down at his own hands, stained red, shaking. He wanted to speak, but no words came. The boy held up the flower. "Mama said flowers can forgive bad people. Do you want one?" Matteo's throat tightened. His vision blurred. He knelt slowly, reaching out to take the flower, but the boy pulled back. "No," the boy whispered. "You have to say sorry first." Matteo's eyes filled with tears. For the first time in days, his voice cracked, broken, trembling. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." The boy nodded, placed the flower in his hand, and walked away. Matteo stared at it, a single white flower against the red of his palms. Narrator somberly. For a moment, the fire inside him went quiet, and in that silence he finally heard her voice. Lucia's whisper. "You can't wash blood with more blood, Matteo." By nightfall, the city was silent again. The fires had burned out. The blood had dried on the cobblestones. Matteo stood on a bridge overlooking the water. The reflection of the city light shimmered on the waves, red, orange, golden. He dropped his gun into the river, watching it sink slowly, disappearing into the dark. Enzo limped toward him, alive, bandaged, his voice low. "It's done, boss. The city's yours again." Matteo didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the horizon. "It's not mine, Enzo," he said quietly. "It never was." Enzo hesitated. "Then whose is it?" Matteo turned, his face pale under the streetlight. "It belongs to the ghosts now." A cold breeze swept across the bridge. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Finally, Matteo said softly, "Bury Angelo with the rest. No names, no stones, just dirt." Enzo nodded slowly. "And you, boss? What will you do now?" Matteo looked up at the sky, gray clouds drifting across the moon. "I'll disappear," he said. Let them forget I ever existed. Hours later, Matteo returned to the church one last time. He walked to the same altar where Lucia used to pray. The candles flickered softly, their light dancing across the cracked marble floor. He placed the white flower on the step, next to her picture. I kept my promise, he whispered. I found who did this. I made them pay. His voice broke. But I lost myself in the fire. He closed his eyes, kneeling before the altar. Tears rolled down his face, cutting paths through the dust and blood. Tell me, Lucia, was it worth it? The church stayed silent. Only the wind answered, a soft sigh through the broken window. He smiled faintly, almost peacefully. Maybe one day I'll see you again. He stood, leaving the locket beside the flower, and walked out into the pale dawn. They say the city never forgot that day. The day Matteo Ricci painted the streets red. Some say he vanished into the hills. Others swear they saw him walking the docks at sunrise, carrying a single white flower. But no one knows for sure. Because monsters don't leave graves. They leave stories. And his story became a warning. Don't take from a man who's lost everything. Don't light the fire if you can't stand the heat of what comes next. And so, his revenge ended where it began, in silence, blood, and love. The city healed. The ghosts faded, but the name Matteo Ricci still whispered through the streets, because when he said, "Tell me who did this," he didn't just ask for truth, he promised a reckoning. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this, where love and vengeance dance on the edge of fate.